value in all the emotions, and then and knowing that, you know, knowing that they're bringing us wisdom, knowing that there are actions that we can do. um, Most of the time there's something that can be done with that emotion, not to change the emotion, not to make it go away, but like an action that helps us to integrate the emotion or move forward. And I like that aspect of things.
It puts the power in your hands, right? You have the power to decide what you want to do next, right? So if your anger has come up, you can decide, well, is this something that I need to say something about? Maybe I just need to change my voicemail to let people know, don't leave me messages or whatever, you know? I mean, it can be a tiny action just for yourself as well, right? It might be that you choose to wear a certain color for yourself that day, or that you like do a little happy dance or something. Like there's so many actions. It doesn't have to be a big showy thing for you to acknowledge and work with your emotions. It can be something really tiny and very personal. Oh, oh, it's
Right.
always very personal.
Right, it is, and it's different for each of us, what works and what helps to change our state. I do want to say that um, the I want to also say that there are actions to be taken, and sometimes that action is just to let that pain be there. I think part of me when I was saying that was like, oh, this is appealing because you can do something about your emotions, right? And in one way that is true, and there's a lot of things to do to support the emotions, but there is often a lot of lessons about, I feel really helpless and there's actually nothing to do about that. But we have skills inside of DEI to help us bear that helplessness, right? And to witness it and to be with it and to resource ourselves. And we don't have to make it go away. Um, I just wanted to say that because I think that we can get Pollyanna, like, oh, if you just listen, name them, and do the action, you'll all feel
Happy.
fine, happy. And that's, I just wanted to make sure that that's not what we're saying. It does feel often great that to be able to move forward with the emotions, but for the emotions that are those, really harder ones, like the hatred is harder to face, the grief is harder to face, that it's not as simple as taking one action and moving forward, but it's really having being with it. There's a lot of witnessing, there's a lot of listening, and there's um, a lot of growing that happens inside of being with them. Like the sole purpose isn't to make them go away and to appease them, right? Sometimes it is, sometimes that's true, but then sometimes when it's bigger and larger and deeper, there is time spent with emotions and it's uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think for a long time I had to tell myself, I don't like this. It hurts. It feels bad. And I was like, okay, I don't have to like it. It doesn't have to feel good. Um, and and that's okay too. I just found I had to do a lot of reassuring of when I was in some of the more painful places of grief and everything. Of like, yes, this is here too. It's
Yeah.
allowed to be here. You know, and it's that holding and the expanding of being able to hold both things.
You make such an important point. It is, emotions are not about just getting rid of them and moving on. We're experiencing emotions all the time, right? And most of the time, our emotions are at a pretty low level. So, and by low level, I mean they're just kind of like soft and like directing us, right? Our soft fear is helping us to focus on the task at hand, whether that's driving or writing a note or a check or whatever, right? Our soft anger helps us maintain boundaries and say, no, I need to have lunch at 1 o'clock. Our soft sadness helps us let go, like, okay, well, I guess I can push the meeting back, or I can, well, since we can't make dinner tonight together, we'll have to do it like next week. It's like, it's all these things that are, your emotions are always with you. They're always helping you do these things. But oftentimes the only time we really pay attention to them is when they're really intense and right up in our face and we can't ignore them anymore.
Right.
And it's at that point where you don't want to ignore your emotions anymore. You have to pay attention to them. And you need to sit with it and feel all the things it wants to tell you,
Yeah.
because up until then, maybe you haven't been willing to listen, right? Maybe you've been scared or felt ashamed or um, haven't been ready.
Yeah.
And your emotions have, they have really important information for you that may not be easy to hear. And I think that's a lot of the discomfort is your, it's almost like your body is getting used to a new way of being through the transformation of feeling this emotion. I think of grief as a transformational emotion, because you are going through this process and it's almost like your very atoms of your being are changing, because it no longer has this thing or this person in your life anymore. And so it's like you have to go through a rearrangement, and it's not that you're erasing the memories. You still have those, and you still have, the honoring of that memory and of that time you spent, or that thing that you lost. But at the same time, you're rearranging your energy so that you can go forward, and that takes time. And it does, it can feel really uncomfortable. I think a lot of it is because it can be very uncertain. Like we as Americans don't have a lot of experience with really letting our emotions flow. We're
Yes.
all about repression or expression, but not a lot of self-awareness.
Right.
So when we let ourselves consciously welcome in, like, oh wow, I'm feeling really sad. And I've gone through the same process you have of noticing, like, oh, sadness, you're here. Why are you here? You're here again. Okay. All right. I guess I'll just be sad for a while. Find out what this has for me.
Right.
What am I letting go of now? Right.
Right.
So I've always had a deep resistance to feeling emotions. Like it's kind of a scary thing, because yes, it's going to change my world a little bit.
Yeah.
And change is scary. It's a little hard. It's like you don't know what's going to come next.
Yeah. And I also think it can feel lonely. It can feel lonely sometimes when you're going in and you're facing some of these emotions, because our society isn't so adept at listening and accepting the emotions. You then like go to say to someone, oh, feeling a little depressed about that, and they're like, oh my gosh, you need to do this about your depression. Like they often, if they aren't aware and working with emotions, they want to fix or stop, or um, and it comes from a good place of like not wanting someone you love to be in pain, but and so I just remember, especially early on when I was working inside of this new language, I found it feeling a little lonely, because I would take it to someone and then they wouldn't really be able to witness it or hold it. And they really just wanted to change it, especially I think around grief. Like that is so uncomfortable for all of us to be with. And so I remember feeling a little bit lonely around that. And in a way, over time, because we get to do this work and because we get to come close to grief, and we get to understand what these things are about, I'm now more able to support other people who are going through it without changing it, with just I can listen, or I can be here with you. And it also doesn't bowl me over. Like I'm not trying to do their grief for them. I'm there to see. And some of my most valued memories inside of troubled times were people who could just come and be with me and not like change anything about what was going on, but just spend that time together. And I want that so much for people to be able to have that. Oh, like it's so transformative to have someone to be able to just listen and not change,
Right.
not. Yeah.
it seems like when people are trying to give you solutions, oh, you're depressed, have you taken pills, right? Kind of a thing. It feels like they are telling you that you're wrong for
Yeah.
having this emotion,
Right.
that there's something wrong with you for having it and that you shouldn't be feeling these things.
Right. They're ashamed.
But I also want to point out that's their stuff,
Yes. Yes.
right? That's not yours.
Right.
And that whatever
No,
emotion.
it's not, but that's when you're like being vulnerable and you're like, I'm feeling depressed. And they have a reaction to depression that's inside of their family system. No, it's such a hard match, And so it's just, that can be a challenge where, yeah, they're responding to their own ideas about what depression means.
Mm-hmm.
That's where our DEI group has been so helpful, because we come together and sharing the same ideas about emotions. And so it's very comfortable to say, oh, my suicidal urge came up this week, and we all know what that means. And there's no panic in the room because of it, because we all understand what we're talking about. And I just really appreciate that about the community that Carla has built through this work. And even just doing conversations like this, to be able to come in and talk about it without having to do lots of explanations, or like, I'm not having to work on Anshin's emotions right now. You've got yours and I've got mine. And that then takes a burden off of you. Like, a lot of people are always trying to do other people's emotion work, and so they never even get to their own, because there's so many layers. They're like doing everyone's emotions around them, and they never get to their own. And it can just really leave people feeling stuck.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They never get to, well, I think it's also a sort of distraction too from people paying attention to how they're feeling, because they're trying to fix everybody else.
Yes,
They're
for
trying
sure.
to make everybody else okay, and
Yeah.
they're ignoring themselves and, what really they need to focus on. And, what's going to give them the greatest gift is taking care of their own emotions, listening to their own emotions. And no doubt their emotions have something to say about taking care of everybody.
Exactly. Well, and it's such an immediate practice, like you learning to listen to your own emotions then means that at some point you can also listen to other people's emotions in that like very neutral, loving way, where you're going into emotions and like, who's here? What do you need to tell me? I'm listening. Then you are able to offer that to other people. But you can't really do it with other people unless you can do it with yourself.
Mm.
It's like you're learning a skill here. It feels very internal, but it really is. You then can share it with everybody, because you've done it a lot with yourself, and you have a lot of resilience inside of that space.
Mm-hmm. Right. And a boundary too, understanding
Yes.
like, this is me, these are my emotions, this is how I feel when
Yes.
I'm experiencing these emotions.
Yes.
And then there's this other person, how are you feeling?
Yes.
Right. Let them have their own boundary instead of trying to reach in and like, let me adjust you. Like, no, don't do that. Let them let them feel what they're feeling, let them figure it out for themselves. And you can even give them a little emotional vocabulary list
Right.
to help them like work it through, figure things out.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. So yesterday I went through my emotional vocabulary list, knowing we were talking today, and I hadn't pulled it out in a while, and I had so many emotions come up, and words that usually don't usually speak to me. And the very last word that came up, so it was a whole range, it was all the different groups, all different intensities. And the last one said, and optimistic too. And then I was confused again, right? Because I started in confusion. I went through a whole range, and then there was optimism there. And it felt, but I believe it. Like, which I think in a time where there's so much going on in our world, and it's so hard to be alive and witnessing all that's happening, it feels strange to come upon optimism inside of all of this. But it was no better than any of the other emotions. It was just a like pleasant surprise, like, oh, there's optimism is here too, alongside these other emotions. And I wouldn't have believed it because it is such a hard and heavy time to be in the world, that you like, in a way, it's almost reverse of as it used to be. Everyone was looking for happiness, and now it's like, happiness probably doesn't exist in this world right now because of how hard it is. But yet, in small ways, if we listen, sometimes it's there and it surprises us.
I think that there's definitely an undercurrent of optimism
Yeah.
um, underneath even the despair and the really hard things happening. I think about um, other people I know are um, who have kids and who are continuing to have kids, who like got pregnant during the pandemic or whatever. And I feel like there must be this underlying sense of optimism, thinking like things are going to get better.
Right.
Because how else could you like have the audacity to like welcome somebody else into the world?
Yes.
And that was something I really asked myself before I had my own child was, is this is this somebody that I can support for the rest of my life? And do I believe that, I'm willing to work to give her a world that is going to be still there for her?
Right.
Right. And it's shocking that that's even a question.
Yeah.
But I think that, yeah, there is definitely this sense of optimism of yes, we can do this, we can overcome whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it might be ungrounded. It might be unfounded. They're really resilient.
but it was a very pleasant little moment. I was like, oh, hello, optimism. Thank you. Because it's also true that when you're with the harder emotions, um, there is a freedom that comes sort of when some of that work is resolved and that information is integrated. There is a freedom that happens,
Yeah.
and you never know when that's going to come to you. I mean, that's where, like, when grief is happening, joy often shows up too, and it's an unexpected pairing, right? It's an unexpected mixed emotion, when we have grief, to expect that joy will come and visit you in that place, but it's often hand in hand. It's really amazing.
Jennifer, thanks so much for joining me today. I really have loved this conversation.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It is my pleasure. Thanks for having me.